As you may or may not be aware, so resources, we have lookups, but we have other kinds of resources. So you can often use them in a very similar way as a lookup. So a lookup is just, here's a list of things, right? It can be, I mean, you can look at the document, it can be JSON, new line formatted, MISP format, OTX. We support a bunch of different things. But it can also be an API. So, for example, we have the VirusTotal API. So, if you set your key in your organization, you can start to automatically do lookups against the VT API. So you can do that all from within LimaCharlie. We also have services. So some services expose lookups themselves. So like the OTX service allows you to not only scan kind of for everything you've got, but you can actually specify scanning for what specifically, which pulse, where you want to scan it, how you want to respond to it. The last topic of the intermediary would be the transforms, and then I will go into the advanced, and we'll kind of get a little bit of a feel for it. So the transforms are fairly straightforward. So the transforms are additional components that you can set with an operator. And what they're saying, they're transforming what the operator is looking at. So let's pick a basic example. I don't know if we have one here. Let's say, this is an example of on an artifact, but we're saying here, this operator is saying, if the path in PDB contains this value, do something about it. But what if, what's at PDB is not like a single value, but it's something bigger. So let's say it's either a file name or a file path, or it's a domain name. Sometimes you want your rule to say, let's pick the domain name example. You want your rule to apply to a whole top level domain, not just a specific domain name. So if your event is telling you, updates.evil.com as a DNS request, and really you're interested in blocking or talking about evil.com, you can't do a lookup on update.evil.com on a list where you're holding, and maybe you have a lookup that's called evil.com, because they're not going to match. They're different. So you want to transform the value that is in the event and then apply your lookup on that. So the two main transforms I just mentioned, file name and subdomain. The file name is kind of the easiest one of the bunch. The idea is I have a file path, and I'm only really interested in the file name of this. Sometimes, sure, you can use the ends with, but if you're comparing, a literal value against it, but sometimes you want to use it against a lookup. So let's say you're responding to an IR, a file name that's used by the attacker for their DLL, but it goes in random directories. One way you could do this is you could have a rule that says, take my event/file path of a new process, and I'm going to use the file name transform. So let me switch to code, because I think it'll be a little bit easier for people to just see. All right, let's make a new file. So transform.yaml. Alrighty. So maybe, I would say, I have my path, which is event file path. And, if I was, like I was saying, if I was looking for a literal, I could literally just say end with evil.exe. And then my operator could be ends with, right? So if my path ends with evil.exe. But now let's say I have a bunch of those file names. I have like 100 of them. So I don't want to have 100 things. So I'm going to create the lookup, right? That I'm going to push to LimaCharlie. And I want to look the name against in that lookup. So my lookup is going to contain evil.exe, eviler.exe, I'm really evil.exe, like these kinds of things, right? So here, what we could do is we could say, okay, this is going to be a lookup. it's going to be in a resource, right? So LCR lookup mine. And then I'm going to say, so as it is right now, we take the file path. Is the whole path in that lookup? Probably not. Maybe it's in the user directory, which kind of messes up your whole thing because the user is going to change. Here you would say you use a transfer file name, true. So this is telling LimaCharlie, hey, take the file path, take whatever was here, but before looking it up, right, before feeding it into the operator, I want you to transform it, and I want you to go from, C users max evil.exe, and I want this to become evil.exe. Simple as that. So fairly straightforward. That's the file name operator. The other operator can be a bit more complex to use, or it's more customizable, right? File name is a file name kind of thing. The other transform is the subdomain. Can't remember if there's a space. There is a space. So subdomain, it will take a different type of value. So it's a slice notation. So, it might take you, if you haven't, done software development before, like it might take you a little bit to kind of grasp it. But essentially what you're doing is you're describing what part of the domain you're interested in. So let's say our domain is, this is my domain, right? This is what I'm seeing when I look up. And I'm only interested in getting this. So the slice notation is where I will define the index that I want to, the index of the DNS component, the labels, I believe they're called in the protocol. So this is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3. So I will specify the start and end index that I'm interested in. And I'll do that separated by a colon. So in this case, if I want the last 2, there's a shortcut I can use. So I can say -2 colon. And by not specifying the end index, that means all the way to the end. So this is going to take my, my full domain and extract and make it eviler.com. And that is what's going to go against my my lookup in this case. But you can use it in a bunch of like different operators. The idea is that this will really allow you to, maybe you're saying that you don't want anybody to access, again, like anything on like, the AWS delivery network or like, 3322.org, just to pick a completely random example. Let's say 1.1. So this would change it to, evil, right? If I changed it to 0.2, I would go from 0, 1, 2. So I would go, and that would become some.evil. So you can see how you can kind of iterate from that. That's also a pretty useful one in combination with the string distance operator. So the Levenstein distance, which will tell you how closely a string looks like to another string, the distance in number of letters. So the tip here is, let's say I'm corp.com, right? This is my corporate domain, and I want to see if anybody ever like registers some weird DNS that looks like corp.com. I could say a little bit like before, right? I could say -2 to 0, and then use a string distance. And then I forget the exact definition of it, but essentially you can say max of, let's say, 3 and a value of corp.com. Something like that. It will actually look for any domains. So domain name, their last two, the TLD, like the last two components of their DNS, and will look if it matches very closely to corp.com, right? Maybe the attacker decided to use corp.com, right? So the Levenstein distance, a string distance, is going to tell you, hey, with a single letter change here, you look like corp.com. This might be some kind of phishing. So that's a little bit of parenthesis. But it should give you an idea of like the amount of power of like all the things that you could do with LimaCharlie. And always also keep in mind that you can put rules that operate on detections from other rules. So you can also even kind of create levels of rules that describe very, very specific behavior, or tags from hosts, stuff like that.